Obviously, we're in unprecedented times, in a pandemic-created economic recession, facing a $54 billion budget deficit, and right now, that really creates the prospect of heartbreaking and gut-wrenching cuts. And so I just want to emphasize two themes, not specifics. They can be applied to a number of specifics, but two themes. One, that we do what a lot of us have already asked that we do, which is keep our most vulnerable in mind and top of mind as we make our decisions. And two, that we prioritize revenue options more than we have so far in this discussion. We know right now that so many people are barely hanging on, others can no longer hang on. We know that folks are teetering on the edge and some have fallen over the edge already. We know that an economic recession hurts first and hurts worst those most vulnerable in our community. So folks need us to help them more, not less. They need us to invest in them, not cut from them. So I really ask that we consider our most vulnerable. We've talked so much about heroes, our frontline essential workers, our food supply chain workers, our first responders, our healthcare workers, our teachers and classified workers. They are literally feeding us, teaching our kids, keeping us safe, keeping us healthy, in many cases keeping us alive. And many of them stand to lose so much from the cuts and proposed cuts in this budget. And I know those cuts aren't desired. We take no pleasure in them. They're unintended consequences. But I really ask that we keep that equity lens as we view our budget and make decisions about who is going to benefit and who is going to get hurt. Because the cuts hurt most those least prepared to bear that burden. So let's keep that in mind. And I know so many of you are, and I appreciate that concept and that idea and that value being uplifted so many times. And then I want to just appreciate a lot of the thinking that's gone in from both houses, from Department of Finance, LAO, from the governor, in how to balance a budget. Some of them, I think, are incredibly thoughtful, but they also create anxiety and worry for me. For example, the federal stimulus proposal, I definitely support the HEROES Act. I know so many of us do. If that money came in, it would be huge for us, but it may or may not. And if it doesn't, we're going to face, it triggers cuts that are just incredibly painful and damaging and hurtful to so many people that we care about. The borrowing proposals that we've heard about definitely can help us now, but they need to be paid back later. And at the potential cost and pain and harm to some of our most vulnerable communities later. Cuts now, for sure, hurt those who are least able to bear that burden. So I do want to ask us to make more central and as a higher priority and more prominent in our discussions the possibility of revenue options. Mr. Gray proposed one earlier today. It's worthy of consideration. That's the kind of creative thinking we need to have right now to minimize the cuts and the pain on the people that we all care about so deeply. So I want to end with a question, which is, if we are to have a thoughtful and responsible and deliberative discussion about revenue options, what, Ms. Bossler, Mr. Petek, do you suggest be the principles that guide that discussion? Should we be thinking about removing or reducing tax breaks? Would we be targeting certain tax increases or new revenues? How do you recommend the legislature think about what I think we need to think more about, which is increasing revenues to help balance a budget in a very difficult economic situation? Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for the question. I think there could be a couple of ideas out there as far as taking another look at some of the state's tax expenditures. And in some cases, we think that some of the tax expenditures that exist have a questionable policy justification. That you could consider the step-up basis on inherited assets, where a person inherits an asset and it's not repriced to market value. You could consider moving the state's tax code more in line with what they call conformity to the federal tax code, and put a limit on the property tax deductions that people benefit from currently with their local property tax payments. And so there are probably a range of options, and I think our office would be happy to assist with providing some of that analysis. And we actually have a post on our website that talks through some of these ideas. So there are some ideas out there.
Thank you, Mr. Petek.